And this is how the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The eighth and final episode of Dope Thief is here. It is called Innocent People. Guys, I don't think I've ever seen a show in the history of television, and I'm discounting network TV because when you have 24 episodes, they're shrinking them now. But when you have 24 episodes, you're going to have lulls or drops and dips of quality. I've never seen an 8 episode run have such a change in the quality of the episodes from the very beginning, which those first 2 episodes of the series were completely amazing, were fire. And I know Ridley Scott directed the first one. They were just great television. And they subsequently started getting worse and worse as things went along. A lot of it was character motivation, just the way that this was written. Some things were sped along. This just got worse as we went along. And I think the last episode was probably the best that has sort of occurred since the first 2 episodes, but it's a little too late. And then this episode does the thing that this series has done, and it's been annoying. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it outside of all the character motivations that just didn't make sense and just lack of judgment or lack of common sense from characters. There is I'm going to say the blue ball syndrome, if you will, but there is a tendency for this show to build up tension, and then just let it go as if, you didn't just watch that episode. It happens here at the very beginning of this episode. As bizarre and insane as that whole hospital sequence is at the last end of the last episode, where you're seeing like, oh my God, somehow the whole hospital was wiped out, people were murdered. It looks like a scene from Resident Evil. We pick that up and then we just drop it. Any tension that was there, we're like, cool, that was an intense scene, and now let's spend the next 25 minutes setting up something else that then does never sort of recreates the tension that was led in that scene. So this has a very this series as a whole has had this very thing where we're going to ratchet things up, ratchet things up, ratchet things up, and then just pop the balloon and let the air out. And that's sort of what the first 2 episodes do, because this whole series is sort of just let the air out of whatever those first 2 episodes sort of recreated. Innocent People begins where Michelle and Raymond are still in the elevator, and you still hear on the walkie-talkie the voice still clamoring out for Raymond. They want Raymond's attention. They want Raymond. And then the elevator doors open. Raymond's there with a knife, and the DEA come to sort of rescue Raymond in the moment. Now, while being treated by the hospital and the people there, the walkie-talkie is still going off and still is asking for Raymond. Is basically asking to meet Raymond in privately. And even though Michelle is sort of saying, no, don't, Raymond's like, nope, I will. And you're like, bet, this is about to go down. So we get the intro, the theme song, and then we don't go back to the moment where we want to see Raymond and whoever is on the other side of this voice come together until the very end of this. So all that tension's lost immediately. You're like, oh, it looks like it's about to go down. We're about to get into it. Never mind. We got some other stuff we got to lead to before we get to that point. Some of the things they lead to, quite obvious, and I'll point it out as soon as we get there. And I'm sure anybody else who was watching this caught it the second that this new character out of the blue came into the show. Raymond goes to the funeral of Manny, so we're now seeing days pass. Even though this meet has been asked to be set up, we're seeing that there's enough time to be had where Raymond gets to go and have a funeral. And there seems to be even more days that pass along, where the sense of urgency for this person who's saying, I need this to happen immediately, and Raymond saying, like, let's do it, there seems to be enough time to pass where, like, oh, that wasn't that urgent of a thing. Like, let's do this. Well, let's table it for like 72 hours, maybe a week. We'll come back to it. It's not that. This money doesn't mean that much to me, so we'll come back to it when it comes. Is that good with you, Raymond? Cool. Go ahead and do what it is you got to do. What? But Raymond goes to a funeral while he's in cuffs. So the DA is still watching him. They're also tailing and watching people that are going in and out of the funeral, because there still is the idea that Raymond may be sort of a head of a drug cartel. Sherry obviously is there and gives Raymond a necklace for protection and says, hey, you need this. She also lets Raymond know that I have the money. Raymond's like, well, crap, you shouldn't have it. Like, it's a danger to anybody who has it. But he now knows where the money is. That's only important for what happens in the back end of this episode. Otherwise, there's no real need for Sherry to have that conversation with Raymond. The next day, we sort of see Raymond going through treatment. Again, not all the same day. Doesn't feel like that anyway. Raymond going through treatment, sort of rehabbing and getting better. And he is met by Michelle. Michelle comes to visit him. And in that, he discusses how Philadelphia is a trap. They're trying to use this as a metaphor and an analogy for each other. But he says, like, Manny and I always refer to Philly as a trap because we're never going to get out of it. And I don't know who pulled us under or who put us in this situation, but we stepped into something that created this hornet's nest that just took everybody that I love and cared about out. And I need to know who that is. And I will do what it is, whatever I can, to make sure that I suss out and find out who that person is. So the next, who knows the days, because there's no real time stamp to any of this or sense of urgency for anything that happens in this episode. The DA begins to interrogate Son, and they're asking him deeper questions. And what it has led to is that how could he be sort of protected for as long as he has been? And then they did some digging, and they find out that his home is under sort of a deconfliction order, which means that an agent at some point in time put his house in a position where it was no longer on the radar for agents, so they wouldn't attack it or like put it under investigation, nor would it ever get shot up. It was kind of in this weird nebulous protection spot, which immediately starts setting off red flags for Son, which we sort of knew that he was either an informant or something because he had been arrested before, he had been incarcerated before, and has built himself up a new life that's a little too easy for him. Neither here nor there. In this, we learned of the deconfliction piece, and they're saying, cool, all of that's sort of being removed from you. So whoever was your guardian angel before, we need to suss that out. And if you can't give that to us, you can't let us suss that out, then we're just going to hang you out to dry, and you no longer have that as a protection. This next piece is probably one of the biggest things that it's just like, huh? Considering all the sort of angst that Mina had for Raymond in this show, for them to sort of reconcile and sort of become BFFs and a buddy cop picture in like the last 20 minutes of a season finale or series finale is mind-boggling. Like, it's clear that if there was a sense of direction for the show, or if there ever was a point where they're like, hey, this is what we want to do, nobody had the foresight to sort of, hey, we should probably put this sooner or earlier in the season, because there's a lot of time spent saying, will they, won't they, her chasing this. But if we're going to do this where we're expecting them to get along and be so well by the end of this, push that sooner so that we can sort of take a little bit more time to buy that. To give us the last 20 minutes of a series finale for them to be BFFs just seems nuts. That said, Mina meets Raymond in the hospital. Raymond is kind of sorry, says, I'm sorry. I never meant to put you in this harm. Mina's like, well, that time's over with. Like, we're not dealing with that. What I am here to say is that I think the time to stop digging yourself further in the ground is over. You need to come to light, put this in front of you, and give me all the information that you possibly have about what you know. And you may not know everything. You may not even know why the things are the way that they are, but just give me whatever you have so we can get to the bottom of this. And Raymond agrees. And so they're off to be the best friends. Then the next scene happens where we meet a Boston agent named Bill who pulls rank on Nader. And it's the moment when I was like, oh, this series had no sort of direction or sense of what we were going to do or how we were going to introduce this to begin with. Because this very second that this Boston accented agent comes to and starts speaking, I immediately know that, oh, that's the person on the other side of the voice. Like, that was on the other side of the walkie-talkie. Like, that's the person. Nobody else hears this voice. Like, you all were on the walkie-talkie when he was talking. Like, it wasn't like he was using the scream decoder to change his voice. That's him. No one else. Nope. Hello? No one else? Cool. All right, then I guess we're just going to have to accept ignorance from all of these DEA agents. And as an audience, you expect me to also be dumb and say that I don't know what I know. Cool. And so the Boston DEA agent essentially tells Nader that, hey, Raymond stepped into something that he was not privy to. He did not know to. Let's use him to sort of suss out and get more information. And what they want and what he wants is that he wants Raymond in play because Raymond seems to be the only one who has access to money, which has that money he doesn't care about. Bill doesn't give a crap about that. What he cares about is the numbers that are on those dollar bills to see what it is that they lead to get a little bit more information, which we've sort of come to find out through some investigations and some back and forth that happened with Nader and Mina, that the money is the trail. And so the money, Raymond brings them up that they have like these codes on them, and that money, those codes are signs of like longitude codes. And so they put them in and they sort of find this area where that might be where Jack has sort of planted this money or information or whatever it is that Boston Bill is looking for. So Mina and Nader go back and forth interrogating Raymond. They're sort of trying to build up a case, trying to figure out where they need to head to next. Once they get the longitude codes, Raymond informs me that he's like, I think Jack was in on this. Like, I think he had a setup. He was in on the hit. He was in on his own cut. And they sort of were at odds. Mina and he were both sort of pawns in all of this, and that they were put in place to sort of shut Jack down. Like, all of this was sort of put into motion to shut Jack down. It's at that point that Boston Bill talks to them and lets them know that, like, clearly the money is not what I'm after. I'm after something else. So they have to go figure out what that something else is to see why he is in such a chase for them. We then see a sequence where Son and Raymond meet at the DEA office. They were holding Son, and Raymond comes in. They have a little bit of a conversation, but then the DEA just gets Son to sort of admit to, hey, were you aware of the drugs that were coming through prior to the date that this hit came through? And Son eventually says, yes, he was, which lets us as the audience know that Son had some sort of play in whatever happened at that building. And even despite him saying how much Raymond's family to him, there is something that he did that put Ray and Manny into harm's way. Raymond cuts a deal. We don't see it, it's all messy, whatever. Raymond cuts a deal, and when he cuts a deal, he goes to go see Michelle to sort of say his goodbyes, if you will. He's more or less saying, gives her a record and says, hey, look, you made me whole. I know you are the one person with all of this mess happening that you believed in me, you put me back together, and you got me to believe that I should be doing something better with the information that I have and my life. And so it's a sort of way of saying thank you. She starts crying and be boo-hooing. She mentions like, oh, the first time that I saw you, you were crying, and now I'm crying, blah, blah, blah. Again, whatever the hell they were doing is to put them together in a love relationship. Also, as we can see, there is no rhyme or reason to anything that happens in this show. So, but this is his way of saying goodbye. You fixed me, and I'm going to buy you this gift. Thanks for the sex. It's been real. We then see that they take those longitude codes and they go to what is this Amish burial ground. And the codes ends up with a thing that gives it the 3273. One of the Amish plots has a tombstone that has 3273. It's like, oh, couldn't it be? Of course, it's that easy. And so they just start digging up around that area, see what Jack left them. And it's basically the whole kit and caboodle of who is all in the DEA, that is in the DEA alliance, who was dirty and sort of about this whole cabal that they've sort of put together. Son, the Boston person, the Boston Bill, asks that Son and Raymond come to this meet so that he can have them both there. Raymond and Mina are off doing their own thing, and then Son is asked to get out of the car butt naked and walk to the middle of the bridge while Mina and Ray are doing their thing at another off, not quite close, but enough that in a running distance you can get back to the other spot. Once they find the DEA sort of kid and caboodle of who's in the DEA alliance, Raymond tells, hey, send word back to the folks that are at the other spot with Nader and all of them to give them the heads up that this is an ambush and to get Son out of there. It's already a little too late because at that point, gasp, oh my God, Boston Bill's the person who's behind all of this? Sure. Boston Bill then shoots Nader, shoots all the other people that are sort of keeping surveillance at this place. And then he steps out and he sort of watches Sun on the bridge, butt naked, get a red dot infrared on his chest. And at that point, we see some DEA agents come upon him. And then those DEA agents get all taken out. And what we subsequently see is that Sun's number two was sort of in hiding, and he took out all the DEA agents. Sun's mom comes in the car. They get into the car together, and Boston Bill says, "Yo, you were one of my best clients. I appreciate everything that you do for me." But Sun's like, "Yeah, now I have to roll. I'm on the run. I can't. I don't have the house under protection anymore, so I have to go dip back out and sort of start back over again." He is now like Manny and Raymond originally, but now he is on the run. Boston Bill and his alliance, some of the people that he had put into jail and then I guess subsequently removed from jail, like the person that has been like his number two, who's been leading a lot of the interrogation and who was in prison for the brief moment. He's back out with him too. It's just all the biker folks. They abscond upon the motorhome that Raymond and Mina are in. Again, all of this is a little rushed. With also all the evidence, right? They're in there, and then Boston Bill and the crew set it on fire. Basically, it's like, we're going to kill you and the evidence, so we're going to kill two birds with one stone. And Raymond thinks, like, I know him well enough, which he doesn't. I don't see how that's possible, but he feels like I know him. I'm connected with him enough to be able to push his buttons to get him to sort of suss out when I talk back to him. Now, the reason why that doesn't work is because the majority of the conversations that Raymond and Boston Bill have been on Boston Bill talking to Raymond. Raymond hasn't really said anything back to him. So there's no way that he can sort of know him, but sure. But he susses him out enough for Mina to get a shot off at him, and then they run the fire motorhome into him, thus killing him. And then Raymond puts his cane that he's been using in the gas to sort of keep the car running, and then they dip off to never be seen. Perhaps they're giving the thought that they died in the fire crash. That is not the case. And so the only thing that's a little crazy about that is that they killed Biker Bill, Boston Biker Bill. But there are other people around. If they were just to escape out of that burning motorhome, the other bikers that are there should have seen them, but that doesn't fit the script, so they are able to just escape. So at this point, that Sun, because he thinks so much of Raymond and considers him family, he sends him a video to let him know, like, hey, I'm the reason why we pointed you towards Jack. Jack was getting out of hand, and I put Jack in front of you and Manny because I wanted him taken out. And I expected him to just be gone. And once he was taken out, I expected the DA to sort of drop it. I did not account for Mina being sort of the dog on the bone that would not let this go. And thus this kept blowing up and getting bigger and bigger when it should have just ended. Unfortunately, now we're on the run. And I hope that you got out safe. But I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of this. Don't know what that really does for Raymond, other than sort of to finally tie it all together. But I guess this is sort of Sun getting that release of, like, I care enough about Raymond that I want him to know this. Ray and Mina then are absconding upon the world. They get to a food spot, pick up some burgers, and start eating and chowing down. And it's at that point that Raymond, like, humor sort of gets injected again into the series, when this episode up to this point really has none, which the show has done a really good job of trying to intertwine humor, but this is the first time that it sort of pops in. But Raymond tells me, there's like, this is in another life, I would have seen you. This is where I saw you originally standing outside of the truck. And she was like, well, did you believe me? Was I engaged? She's like, no, you did your job. You did what you're supposed to do. I bought it. He's eating a burger. He gets a bunch of ketchup on. There's this whole bit back and forth with him missing a napkin. Missing the spots with the napkin. He can't quite get it. And then she finally gets it off of him. And she's like, okay, cool, you're clean. And then he says hallelujah, which is, a double entendre there, saying his face is clean, but also he's clean from all the mess that just occurred. And then the damn show ends. Yeah, this I don't think I've ever had a show that had so much promise and such a strong start as this go out on the whimper that this did. Characters don't make sense. Logic, the story doesn't make sense. Boston Bill being the villain twist doesn't make sense. Son might be the one thing that you sort of didn't quite fully see, but even then, you sort of know that he had some type of police protection, and so you didn't know how he was intertwined in all this, but you knew he was in the muck of this, and so none of those things really are new. And so, introducing a character in the last 10 minutes of a show with a Boston accent kind of is a dead ringer. But oh yeah, now the reveal isn't as important. This doesn't matter. We are speeding along through this so fast. When I feel like in those first 7 episodes of this, you could have gotten rid of that whole episode of Manny in the house the whole time being drugged up, or you could have truncated that and put some of this in earlier episodes so that we could have made this a meteor finale. And so the back and forth, the up and down of character development, character stakes, character what's the word I'm looking for? Character motivation. Like people did things in one scene that mentally, in the way that we sort of have established who their characters are, didn't make sense that they do the opposite of or something else different in the next scene. And so none of these people added up to being a whole and full character, which is why the back end of the show just feels like a mess. I do wish now that I've seen the entire series, even after those first 2 episodes being so good, I do wish now that I skipped this. And performances aside, nothing really stands out anymore. And I like Brian Tyree Henry. This show doesn't do him any favors. So by the end of this, any of the goodwill or work that was done in those first 2 episodes, and there's some moments that happen within the rest of it, but anything that happens just seems wasted. The back and forth humor, the stakes don't seem as important, and it just feels rushed. And so I don't know if they were under a time crunch, but this is a series that I would not recommend to anyone because it just subsequently got worse and worse as we went along. Those are my thoughts on the Dope Thief. What did you guys think? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere to place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.